So I'm not going to leave the listeners or viewers waiting much longer. Um, you know,
No worry.
I have to talk to you obviously about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um,
Yeah.
as I kind of told you off camera, and this is no bias because you've joined us today. Not only did I truly love the movie and what they did with the movie, but I strongly feel, and I think if you read a lot of reviews, it's quite a unanimously agreed thing, is that your performance as Leatherface is one of the standout, not just moments, but the standouts of the entire movie. So the work you did is truly incredible, and for the, I feel like, I guess, the pressure you may have had to play such
Hmm.
a, probably the most iconic horror character of all time. How did
Yeah.
you cope with kind of that pressure of knowing I'm playing Leatherface in a Texas
Yeah.
Chainsaw Massacre movie?
Well, once I got over the kind of amazement that it was going to happen, um, and kind of started digging into the job, I was told in pretty much straightforward terms that I was hired to play Gunnar Hansen as if he was doing the part now. So here is where that filmmaking concept of matching comes into play from what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Because now, not only do I have to match myself in every take, but formulating the character, I have to completely match someone else who is no longer alive and I can't talk to them. And I only have a couple of examples of their work from which to formulate my whole characterization. So, um, but like as a challenge, filmmaking wise, that's something that I can sink my teeth into. You know, if I get, it's like a little tiny crack in the dam, right? Like I can get in there
Yeah.
and pull it apart and kind of formulate how I'm going to do this thing. And just to kind of expand on this a little bit more. So they hired me to play another actor playing the same character in a different story as if he were doing it now. So I have to study Gunner's movement patterns and then kind of fuzzy logic wise extrapolate those into my movement patterns and how it would look and be if it was Gunner doing the stuff. And I feel like, you know, I mean, if you kind of said that to somebody before the job, I bet you would get no one to sign up. You know what I mean? They would be like, no way, I can't do it. I don't even know where to start. But if it comes in after, you're like, okay, I guess this is it. Let's go. And you just kind of formulate a way to make it happen. And I didn't know if I could do it. You know, there were times when well, I'm speaking early on in the filmmaking process. There were, you know, a few days where I was like, I'm not sure I can get this done. But you kind of like, you know, don't like this is where my process kind of kicked in. You're like, you just kind of like, don't panic, just keep doing, keep working, keep solving problems. And out of that process, kind of bloomed this performance that people really respond to, and that makes me so proud. Like I get broken up when I talk about it sometimes because it's like, you know, you being the audience saw something that I planned months before and worked really hard on to bring forward, and you're seeing it and it makes sense to you and it moves you, and so that really makes me you know, I mean, it makes me proud, like on a deep, satisfactory, satisfying artistic level.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
know,
mean to make I don't mean to make too much of it, but I'm very proud of the work. So I thank you very much for the kind words.
No, absolutely. The thing is, so, and I always remember this, is when they first announced that there was going to be a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they kind of
Mhm.
dropped little teasers that they were bringing it, I guess, to kind of like modern society, because Texas Chainsaw's
Yeah,
always been a very rural, tucked away kind of set, and this is now like a brand new element. And I think a lot of
yeah,
people, there's always that little bit of worry before the movie comes out of how they're going to do it. And
right.
then the biggest worry is because we've seen so many different actors play Leatherface, and
Yeah,
some have been brilliant. Obviously, Gunnar. To me personally, I love Andrew Bronowski's performances as well. But then there've been some that people maybe necessarily didn't quite enjoy. So that's always another worry for the fans. And
yeah.
I don't know what it was, but the way for me you told the story, the intensity you brought, um, I think the costume was awesome as well. But I
Mhm.
think your performance truly, I guess, made us capture the essence of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the modern times now, which to be honest, I wasn't sure if they were ever going to be able to do. Um,
Yeah.
so for me, that I loved how they did it, and I loved how they shot it, and I loved the sets. Um, how do you feel personally if you watch back on it, on how they managed to bring such a classic franchise into a modern set and a modern kind of times?
Mhm. I mean, for me, the story works as a standalone film and also as a kind of like
Yeah,
bringing the character and the franchise up to date, or at least maybe not up to date, but up to like the 2000, 2010, whatever it is.
yeah,
I'm not saying it's in the past, but I am saying like it's not really yesterday either.
yeah,
um so I think the film was written and conceptually evolved in a way that works. It's an engaging story. And so then, you know, like it was kind of communicated to me that I should focus on making the characters sympathetic in any way that I could. And that's a very touchy line, right? Because you don't want to be like sappy and sentimental,
yeah,
because then the audience will not only reject you, but they'll resent you as well. So I just, and then I'll, not the least of which my character is nonverbal. So how are you going to do that without, you know, lines to kind of convey something? But I feel like it had to do with the relationship my between Mrs. C, mother, and myself, and then counterposed against my reaction to the interlopers or the millennials who come in. So when you play those two things off of each other, then it becomes sympathetic, right? So it's not something that you so much have to like layer on with a big broad knife so that people get hit on the head with it. It's just kind of like you allow those two things to play off of each other and allow the audience to make up their own mind, and then they'll eventually, hopefully sometime within the 88 minutes, they'll be like, oh, those people are assholes and he is the good guy, kill them all, you know what I mean? So I mean, I didn't, that wasn't so much planned, but it was planned that that I wanted to make the character. I made a, I mean, I decided on a backstory that would help that scenario. So I made the decision that that any of the activity seen in the prior movies was forced upon him. In other words, that he did not partake of it willingly, that he was kind of goaded or taught this behavior, and when left alone would not uh, be this kind of chainsaw freak just roving and killing, right? That's what I decided. And that was kind of in the script, but most of it was not in the script. It's just something that I decided that I wanted to bring to the oh my God, are you kidding me? There's chainsaw in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. um Somebody's trimming some trees or something. I don't know. Anyway, uh and so I don't know, I've kind of lost track of where we are in the question now, but you know, I'm I put it in there purposefully, and I think that people see it and respond to it really like I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, like you said, there are elements where you do feel sorry for Leatherface, and one of my favorite scenes, and I guess it kind of touches on that being goaded, is I think the scene is so good as well. Is the scene where Leatherface first enters the bus, and
Yeah,
then he steps on, and all these like the millennials, the kids, are all then staring at him, getting their phones out to film him and calling him a freak and insulting him. And that to me resonates with this is a, I guess a person that is that gets pressured to the point where he kind of has to act out in that way.
right,
So I
right.
kind of get what you mean by where you feel like he's kind of being goaded and these decisions have been forced upon him. Um, but something I'd like to ask you about that bus scene is
Yeah.
how on earth was that filmed? Because to me, it just looked like it was just chaos and hectic in this tiny, compact space.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, filmmaking wise, it's movie magic or whatever, right?
Hmm.
So, but that scene, that whole sequence was designed by Fady to be the most impressive sequence in horror history. So, and to do that, you have to like have a working bus. It has to drive. You have to gut it and make it into a party bus with a theme, and then you have to have a driver and whatnot. But then, so what gets done is the entire interior of the bus, including the ceiling, gets built in a studio. And they do that because then they can remove walls. So, like, when I'm coming up the stairs into the bus and I'm starting the saw, the whole back of the bus isn't there. It's only what is viewed, by the camera. And that gives you it's not so confined then. It looks like it's confined,
Yeah.
and it's seamlessly put together by the craft of editing. Um, but it's that's how it was done.
Wow. That always, I mean, the whole movie, like I said, is it's a brilliant standalone, but there's something about that scene that it's always the first thing I think about when I think of that movie. I think it was so
Yeah.
brilliantly implemented. Um, and obviously with Leatherface, they kind of brought back the original chainsaw. So how did you find working heavily with a chainsaw? And was it like, were there any challenges you faced having to work with one?
I mean, I grew up in the woods in Colorado before I moved to Arizona, and I was, cutting and splitting wood when I was 10 years old. Not, I mean, I wasn't the one using the saw, but
Hmm.
I've always been around chainsaws. I know what they are and what they do. So I was very familiar with them prior to this movie. Um, so I didn't have any problem with it. It's heavy, but it's, you kind of get used to it and work with it. It is what it is. It's got to be in there for the story. So you kind of just, it's, just a tool, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess with the whole ensemble, the costume itself, which I love how they kind of crafted it together. What was your first opinion on the costume, and did you have any challenges working in it, or did it take quite a while to kind of put it all on, and how was all that for you?
Well, um, there's you have to, like, I'm not saying the character thinks this way, right? Like, he doesn't know what I'm about to say. But there's really two characters. So you have the character of the person prior to the mother dying. And then you have the character and the person who is perpetrating the massacre after the mother is dead. And one of the things that I meant so much to me on the journey to making that character kind of more sympathetic to the people is to the audience members, um, is that scene that in other prior movies has been labeled the pretty woman scene. So in other movies, they have him wearing the dress, and what I chose to do was not wear the dress, but just like use the dress to remember my caregiver, my mother.
Yeah,
Um, so I believe that clothes to this character after the death of the mother are a bigger kind of like conduit of what he's feeling internally. Now, he doesn't know that, right? He's not making a decision to put on the tie and the church outfit because of anything other than he wants to change clothes from the previous stuff that he
mhm,
was wearing. But I think he does it on a subconscious level for artistic, artistically exploitable reasons, if that makes sense. So I like the character's costume. I feel like it was functional prior to the death of mother. He's just in overalls and kind of big boots and this and whatnot. And sorry,
no, you're right.
um, that's just like what he's been wearing since he arrived at the orphanage, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, that's just what he wears. And but after that, when he changes clothes into the church outfit with the tie and the slacks, or the apron, those are decisions that he makes that are on a subconscious level. And he's kind of like, all this time and all this, I'm sorry, I'm getting text.
you're okay.
Anyway, um all this time and all these years he's kind of just been sitting in overalls and just kind of like chilling, right?
Yeah,
But then after the mother dies and he starts killing people, he kind of regresses into that other person that he remembers, um and kind of like steps into it easily. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's cool to think
Yeah.
about it that way. Actually, I never kind of thought of it in that way. So it'll be interesting actually when I rewatch it. I'll kind of think back to how he's kind of perceiving things. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so across your time filming, were there any particular challenges that you faced? Was there anything in particular you maybe struggled with a little bit, or maybe things that people would think, oh, that's not too, doesn't look too challenging, actually became quite a challenging task?
Yeah, for sure. So I told you my process is to watch what's being done, right?
Hmm.
And by doing that, I kind of I can know when it's time for me to work, whether I should go with what was being done prior or go against it as a kind of character element. But I got my job 4 or 5 days before the world shut down from COVID. And so COVID was the kind of like whatever the 13th character in that movie because it was so restrictive. Um, like I had 75 of those first generation nose tests
Oh,
like in 90 days because we were shooting like COVID happened. I mean, the world shut down in March and we started shooting in August. So that's like 3 or 4 months there, not too much far removed. And then I couldn't watch other stuff that was being done in front of the camera so that I could help formulate my character, right? Because I was not allowed to be in that zone. So COVID, the way they handled COVID in the entertainment industry is they created zones of jobs. So if your job is putting the sets together and painting the sets, you have no cause or reason to be around the actors. So you were over there. And that's the only area that they could be. If you're a makeup person, you had to be fully masked, fully gloved. I, as an actor, had to have a face shield, but I couldn't wear a face shield like on my head because I had the mask and the other makeup on. So I had to have holding of kind of like clown thing, like, it was one of those plexiglass shields on a stick. It was ridiculous, but necessary. And
yeah.
we never tested positive. You know what I mean? We had 90,
Wow.
2.5 months of never testing positive. So it was, that's one thing that overshadowed the production that I feel like was an insane challenge because it hindered me from doing what I would normally do that would make my job much easier.
Mm.
And instead I had to, here's the kind of like whoops, the kind of kicker thing is I had to trust what other people were saying. I had to trust uh the people who were kind of like adjusting me to I had to process what adjustments they gave me into words and phrases that I can use to do what I want to do with the character and what they want to do with the character, and then kind of like bring that together in front of the camera. It was just for me it was an incredibly challenging process adjustment, but I feel like I made the adjustment and it worked and people loved what we were doing on the days of, and people loved, somebody loved it enough to buy it at Netflix. And then now the people watching it, they love it and respond to what we did. So it kind of like all worked out in the end.
Yeah.